Innocence and Ink. Synopsis. Isla Castell, 18, has lived her whole life in a small Maplemoor town in an orphanage. She wants to connect with people, but she's too shy to go outside. Isla is sweet, quiet, and painfully shy. The only thing she does is take care of younger orphans and dream about the kind of love she reads about in fairy tales. The day she meets Kade, a tattooed, mysterious man with a dangerous aura, everything changes. He is kind to her in a way that surprises her. Their chance meeting at a grocery store starts a slow-burning romance that goes against their backgrounds. He lives in the shadows, and his life is full of crime and secrets that he keeps safe. She is a girl of light who doesn't know much about the world but is curious about how it makes her feel. As their worlds collide, his full of danger and power, hers full of innocence and wonder, they find a fragile love that is worth fighting for. But when Kade's enemies show up and his past puts Isla's safety in danger, they both have to decide if their relationship can survive the fight between good and evil. Can love bring together two people who come from very different worlds? Episode 1. Isla Castell read to the kids at her orphanage every day as part of her normal routine. She liked how their faces lit up and changed from interest to affection as the story went on. She also got lost in the fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast, which she liked to think of as her life's tale, a story that was still favored but not yet told. Isla finished the book and decided to have a quick snack before dinner. She always had time to eat, even though she thought making food was a pain. "Do you want some toast?" she asked. Her voice was soft and smooth, and it was hard to hear the kids talking. But the kids were used to how she spoke, so they all said yes at once. She went down to the kitchen, where her small body moved easily around the room. At 5'2", she was barely able to reach the sliced ham on the top shelf of the fridge, but she made do. Her long, blonde hair danced around her shoulders and fell to the middle of her back as she set out 7 plates. She put mayonnaise, gammon, and lettuce on each slice of bread to finish the toast. Her grey eyes looked over each piece to make sure that all the ingredients were put on in the right order. She smiled a little and called the kids down to eat when she was happy. "Isla!" Clarice yelled. The 40-year-old woman came up the stairs and wiped her furrowed brows with the back of her hand, which looked like she was tired. "Please make dinner tonight. I'm swamped with Toby's paperwork. You know he's getting adopted next week, so I would really appreciate the help." Clarice was the head of the orphanage, and the only mother Isla ever had. The older woman couldn't help but get close to the sweet girl. Their bond was strong right away after they were left at the orphanage when they were only 4 years old. "Of course. I just need to go to the store to get some things." Isla smiled, but her smile faded when she saw her caretaker frown. "Oh, well in that case, dear, we can get by with the bread toast you made. I know you don't want to go alone, especially since it's getting dark." Isla felt small. It was true that she didn't want to travel alone right now, but she was 18. She had just turned 18, but she wanted everyone to start acting like it. "I'll be fine, I just turned 18, you know. I need to learn how to do things on my own." Clarice looked on warily, worried for the pure soul she had raised all by herself. She knew that Isla was too trusting and too innocent for her own good. She hasn't talked to many people her own age because all the orphans in her town were homeschooled. The schools around them were privatized, which made education too expensive. Clarice did everything she could to give the kids the basic skills they needed to learn more after they were adopted. But Isla was never taken in. People didn't like how quiet and shy she was. They wanted a child who would talk a lot and play with other kids. Isla didn't do any of these things. Instead, she kept to herself and watched as kids were taken in by loving families, bubbling personalities overwhelming the lingering presence that Isla had at the orphanage. And now that I'm basically an adult, nothing has changed. Clarice sighed and looked down at Isla. She knew that Isla was correct. As much as she liked to coddle and shelter the girl, she couldn't ignore the fact that she was becoming her own woman. Okay, dear, you're right. But please text me when you get there and call me if anything comes up. And I mean anything. Do you understand? Isla nodded with excitement. She was happy that Clarice was giving her a chance to show that she could do things on her own. She never went anywhere by herself. Clarice or one of the volunteers who came to the orphanage always went with her. She was happy to have some freedom, even if it was just a little bit. Words Isla? Clarice asked. Isla said, yes, of course. She quickly finished her toast and almost choked on a piece of crust as she raced against time. She ran up the stairs and turned left down the hall to access her bedroom so that she could change into something more appropriate for the public eye. Isla slammed her door shut and looked out the window. She saw the sky turning an eerie orange as the sun went down. She opened the drawers next to her twin-sized bed and took out a white, oversized knitted sweater, some faded jeans, and white Converse high tops to complete the look. She put her hair up in two pigtails at the front, letting them mix with the loose strands that were hanging down her back. Isla thought she looked cute. She was probably too cute for a trip to the store, but she didn't leave the orphanage very often, so she took every chance she got to dress up. She looked out her window one last time and saw the sky full of oranges, reds, and yellows. It was getting dark, and she had to leave. She quickly left her room, ran down the hall, and down the stairs to put her shoes on by the door. She said goodbye to Clarice and left the orphanage with a bounce in her step. Isla felt the cool breeze in her hair as she watched leaves of all colors fall to the ground. Isla's favorite season was fall, which it was right now in Maplemoor. She started her 30-minute walk to the grocery store by humming a song. It was a little out of the way, but so was everything else in the small town. When Isla got to the store, she took a deep breath and shivered as she walked from the cool air outside to the hot air inside. The grocery store in Maplemoor, where she lived, was small. Isla could only make so many meals with the ingredients it gave her because it only had a few aisles and a limited food selection. Clarice often went out of town to get more complicated things, but for now, this would do. She texted the older woman to let her know she was coming, then quickly grabbed the things she needed for her dish and went to the front of the store to pay. As she waited in the queue to pay, she heard the soft lull of pop music. Her eyes wandered over the shelf to her left before they landed on a bright red bag full of fruity pearls, which are small treats. She couldn't remember a time when she didn't ask her favorite caretaker to buy her candy. It was her favorite. But when she leaned forward to throw it in her cart, she saw that it was too far away for her to get to. A bigger person got in the way of her rainbow treat. Excuse me, sir, Isla said quietly. She was shy, especially around people she didn't know. She had a soft pout on her lips as if no one was paying attention to her. She decided to politely poke the stranger in the back to get his attention. Sir, could you please move over a bit? I want to. Isla hesitated when the man turned around, and her eyes blinked in surprise. There was a very good-looking man standing in front of her. Isla couldn't help but swallow nervously as she looked at him because his height and build were the most masculine things about him. Tattoos. There were a lot of them on his tanned skin. He had black ink all over his arms, neck, and who knows where else in a very cool way. Isla couldn't help but tilt her head a little as she admired the art form because the calligraphic words, shapes, and shading were so well done. There was no doubt that the girl had lost track of what she was doing when her doe eyes fell on his hair, which was a deep chestnut brown. As the light hit the small diamonds in his ears, her pink pout slipped between her teeth. Do you see something you like? Isla's eyes got bigger, and she quickly turned red with embarrassment. She had been caught looking. He only said a few words, but they were so deep and soft that they made her shiver. Her lips opened and then closed again, and her head tilted down a little as she tried to think of an answer. I'm sorry. Sorry. Isla huffed, angry with herself. It was so embarrassing that she couldn't even find the words to make a sentence. She was angry with herself in her head, but she didn't see how little the man cared about her mistake. He was actually interested in her because she was shy. The man was even more interested in the smaller girl. He was surprised to find himself curious, since he didn't care about other people very much and never bothered to look into the messy details of their lives. Did you need something? He tried again, but with so many confusing thoughts in his head, it might have sounded too harsh. The smaller girl flinched a little and then started to play with the ends of her sleeves when she heard the question. But the stranger's jaw tightened as he thought about those small, delicate hands wrapped around something much bigger than she could handle. I wanted the fruity pearls, but I was in the way, he said at the end. She tilted her head up even more so she could see his face clearly. When their eyes met in a heated gaze, a blush spread over her already red cheeks. She bit her lip and turned away from his blue eyes. Isla thought to herself, all this trouble for some fruity pearls. She saw the long line behind his tall figure and held back a huff because she knew this awkward meeting would last a little longer. What's your name? He spoke in a way that was new to him. His words were so soft that he almost shocked himself. Isla, she said in a shy voice. She dropped her head again and went back to looking up at the handsome man through her lashes. He smiled with dimples and said, I'm Kade. Isla blushed again, but this time it was just because she was so close to this stranger. She fought the urge to touch her face, even though she knew it would be too hot. She was sure that even the coldest winds of autumn wouldn't be able to get through the barrier of heat on her cheeks. Kade felt a brief sense of panic as the last person between him and the cashier paid for their things. He had just met this girl and didn't know much about her. But he wanted to, and he had never wanted anything so badly before. He usually acted rashly when he wanted something like this. But he knew better this time. He had to be careful. Isla looked at her hands when she realized it was almost time for her to pay. She awkwardly twiddled her fingers before looking back at the tall man. Can I get my fruity pearls now? She asked in a strange way. Kade laughed and then reached over to get the red bag. Here, he said, giving her the fruity pearls before asking the cashier for a pack of cigarettes. Isla took the candy, but not without some hesitation. She was glad to finally have the fruity pearls, but she didn't understand why he stood in the queue for so long for a small pack of cancer. Kade noticed that she looked confused as he put the cigarettes in his black jeans. He shrugged in response to Isla's unspoken question. "They have good cigarettes." Isla nodded, not knowing what else to say. Kade didn't leave like she thought he would. Instead, he reached over to put her groceries on the belt and then packed them into 2 bags. Isla's heart raced as she watched without saying a word. She was too scared to step in and let him keep being chivalrous. Kade gently held down her wrist and slapped $100 down for the cashier to take while she dug through her worn-out wallet for the few $20 bills that Clarice had lent her. "Keep the change," he said, not paying attention to Isla's small gasp. The girl's eyes moved back and forth between the $100 bill and the big hand on her wrist. She could still feel the warmth of his palm and the tingles on her skin even after he let go of her arm. She spoke with an unsteady voice because she didn't know how to say no to his kindness. "Thanks, Kade, but you don't have to do that. I have the money right here. I wanted to. Don't worry about it." His big hand was on top of hers again, so she couldn't pull out the crumpled bills to show him she was telling the truth. Isla's eyes widened as the tingles came back, but the touch was gone as soon as he turned to get her groceries. As Kade heard the girl move around behind him, his lips twitched up. She clearly didn't know what to do, and she probably didn't want to take his money. It was too bad she felt that way, though. The amount was just pocket change. And it wouldn't have done him much good anyway, since he didn't need either a round of drinks or a new tattoo. But he knew that $100 was a lot of money for the girl in front of him. And that was enough for him to feel even better about helping her. As the taller man walked towards the sliding doors of the small store, Isla opened her mouth to protest. She looked at his back for a moment before jogging a little to catch up with him. Kade? You don't have to carry my bags. It's not too far to walk from here, and you've already helped me a lot." The blonde stumbled back a little because she didn't expect him to stop and turn to face her. "Hey, it's dark out. What time is it? 9 o'clock? Let me walk you home. I can't let you go by yourself." What he really meant was that he couldn't let her go. He needed to make sure she was safe just as much as he needed to see her again. Still, his words seemed to convince the girl who was thinking about it and couldn't find anything wrong with what he said. It was pretty late, and to be honest, she wasn't very comfortable walking home alone. Maybe it wouldn't be the worst idea to agree. "Okay." At first, the walk was a little stiff because Isla only answered Kade's questions with one word. She didn't mean to be rude, she just, no one had ever tried to get to know her before. It took her more than half of the walk to open up more, and Kade's strange smile or the perfectly round dimple on his left cheek that pressed against her face made her feel better with almost every answer. She was surprised to learn that he had a sense of humor, maybe his scary behavior had led her to believe otherwise. But he definitely liked to tease her. When she told him she had just turned 18, he called her a baby. His teasing made the little girl laugh, and she bit her lip before asking him how old he was. "Me? Oh, I'm old, baby. Kade laughed. Isla's laughter was contagious. Please tell me. She pushed him, her hand innocently grabbing his forearm as she begged. He smiled at her actions in high-pitched plea, and the corner of his lip twitched up. I'm 24. Isla's mouth dropped open a little, but she moved closer to him, looking for warmth without meaning to. That's not old. Kade hummed and leaned down a little so he could talk to her in her ear. Isla shivered when his lips brushed against the soft skin of her lobe because he was so close. No? Well, you're still a baby. He teased, and he liked the way she gasped in shock as he stood up straight. The cool autumn air was a big change from the warm, minty smell of his breath. They were almost at the orphanage when Kade looked down at her with a question in his eyes, but Isla wouldn't look at him. The structure was actually a small house with 2 floors. The house was old, with paint peeling off the siding, and the front yard was full of weeds and grass that had been cut unevenly. The orphanage had definitely seen better days, but it was hard to get kids to go outside and do chores in the cold. Isla laughed nervously and rocked back and forth on the balls of her feet. She was happy to be back home, but she couldn't help but feel sad that she would be leaving the only person who had ever tried to be her friend. She was embarrassed to say how much she cared about a stranger. "Give me your phone," he said. She was always shocked by how forward he was, and she hesitated before fumbling to get her phone out of her back pocket. Sadly, her nerves didn't let her give the device over with a steady hand. When Isla's phone slipped out of her hands and fell on the grass, she said she was very sorry. She bent down to pick it up right away, without thinking about it. Kade swallowed hard as her head dipped down to be level with his crotch. He was once again confused by how naive she was when she stood up to give him her phone, not knowing that she was in a compromising position. He was also grateful that she didn't notice because he knew that anyone else would have seen the heart-on that was pushing against the fabric of his jeans. This girl was really testing his ability to control himself. Kade put his number into her phone and saved it as K in her contacts. He gave Isla the device back and walked to the door while he waited for her to catch up. Isla smiled to herself as she hurried to open the door for Kade, remembering that he still had her groceries. She now had 2 contacts in her phone. Just thinking about it made her happy. The 2 quietly entered the house, and the eerie silence made Isla think that everyone was asleep. She looked at the clock on the wall and her eyes got big when she saw that it was almost 9:30. It was definitely too late to start dinner, the kids must have gone to bed an hour ago. Isla thought that Clarice was still upstairs working on paperwork. She was surprised that the carer didn't text her to ask where she was. The blonde led Kade to the cute kitchen, where he put the 2 bags of groceries on the counter, even though he was still confused. He stayed quiet and walked back to the front door with Isla. There, he turned around and looked down at her one last time that night. She squirmed under his gaze, and he let out a breathy laugh at how uncomfortable she was. As he kissed her left cheek, Kade whispered, "Good night, baby girl." Her porcelain skin gave way to his kiss, and as he pulled away, it turned bright red. Then he turned around and walked down the steps of her house, disappearing into the night. "Where are they?" Kade asked. He had just gotten to his off-site warehouse after stopping by his house to get dressed. He marched through the secure building, adjusting the cufflinks on his suit as he went. The front door slammed behind him. "Can you just chill out for 2 seconds? I swear to God, you always walk around like you have a stick." Because they had been friends for a long time, Micah Rains, Kade's right-hand man and best friend, answered his question in a way that only he could understand. If it were anyone else, they would have a bullet in their head and their body would be in an unmarked grave. Because of this, Kade just rolled his eyes at the comment. As he turned the corner on his way to work, his face stayed stone-faced and eerily calm. Guards stood at the door with their faces showing the same look as Kade's, but their eyes didn't meet his. They opened the big room's double doors so that Kade and Micah could walk in and greet their guests. A boy who looked to be about 18 years old stood up right away to greet the strong man. "Sir, my name is Keelan Holt. I've heard so much about you. It's an honor to meet you." Kade raised his hand to stop the talkative teen, even though the look of surprise on his face didn't bother him. Kade didn't usually say hello to people who wanted to be his couriers because his own employees usually did the vetting. He did, however, check in on the people who worked for him from time to time. Most of the time, he found himself dealing with overly eager teens who were part of an amateur street gang. "Age, name, credentials," Kade said in a bored voice. The boy's smile faded a little, but he quickly pulled himself together by straightening his back and sticking out his chin. "Keelan Holt, 18 years old, is a member of the Graviborn and Ronan Slade's right-hand man. We've delivered drugs to Bruno Leclerc, Curtis Faulkner, and Vincent Rhodes, and they were all happy customers, I can tell you that." Kade walked around Holt while he talked, then sat down on the black couch across from him. He threw his leg over his knee and let his ankle rest on the dress pants that cost more than the leather he was sitting on. "Vincent Rhodes?" Kade asked as he rubbed his chin. Just saying the name made his blood pressure rise and his jaw twitch as he said it. "Yes, sir," the possible recruit said with pride. His chest swelled with pride. Kade hummed in agreement, and the air became tense with silence. Micah's eyes flickered down to where his friend was sitting, waiting for a reaction that he knew that name would cause. But Kade's answer shocked his group. "Great! I have a high-profile client who wants 10 packs, peelers, poppers, and Anna. He wants it by 8 p.m. tomorrow. Sharp. This is your test run, and if he's happy, I'll be happy too." After his announcement, Kade got up and barely noticed the boy's killer smile or the endless stream of thanks the boy gave him. Kade sighed as he left the room and thought about the name that had come up, Vincent Rhodes. He didn't think most people were worth his time, but Rhodes was someone he hated. He was a competitor in almost everything he was good at, and he was a threat to everything he had built. "Kade, what was that?" Micah yelled as he slapped Kade's back. Kade's jaw tightened and he clenched his teeth when the curly-haired man touched him. He pushed Micah's hand away and kept walking to his bedroom, which was a different room he used for late-night meetings. Micah followed him even though he was clearly in a bad mood and kept bringing it up. "Hey, did you hear what I just said?" Micah said, frustrated, with his arm outstretched towards the door they had just come through. "He worked for Vincent Rhodes. Do you know who that is? He could be one of our biggest competitors, or he could be the guy you almost killed years ago." After Kade sighed and cut off his friend's ramble. You don't need to remind me how I feel about him. I haven't forgotten. He took off his jacket and threw it on a chair, not caring to hang it up. He walked around the room, took off his shoes, and sat on the edge of his bed, facing Micah, who was waiting for an explanation. His eyes, which were blank, met his friend's green eyes, which seemed to be looking right through him. This is business, Micah. If they were good enough to work for him, I'm not going to turn away perfectly good couriers just because I don't like the man. Even though Kade hated Vincent Rhodes, he couldn't deny that the man was good at what he did. He didn't see the harm in following their lead if he trusted them to deliver his goods. But he could only speak for himself because Micah looked upset. Kade, do you hear yourself? The people you want to do business with could still be working for the devil. If they were so good at what they did good enough to work for Rhodes, why are they here? People who cross him end up dead and those who work for him stay working for him. No one leaves Rhodes unless they're looking for certain death. You're either in, or you're out, there's no in between. These kids should be dead, and you should have been the one to do it. Kade sat quietly, staring blankly at the wall in front of him. He believed everything Micah said. He didn't get to where he was by being dumb, blind, or anything else that could be called that. He was actually being smart. There was a good chance that the men he was going to do business with were working with Rhodes, but he was going to use that to his advantage. He would need to learn more about how the Rhodes business works in order to officially break away from Rhodes and claim the title of America's top drug lord. Kade said, I have a plan. He didn't bother to tell his friend the details. Micah pursed his lips at what he said because he didn't believe his best friend could have come up with a plan so quickly. Okay. Fine. Sure. I guess you know what you're doing. Micah looked at him nervously before saying, just make sure you're not in over your head with this. I've been with you from the start and I know how much he means to you and how much this means to you. So be smart. Kade nodded curtly, which Micah took as a sign that he should leave him alone to think. Isla! Isla! Toby yelled as he jumped on her bed. The 7-year-old orphan crept into her room, wanting to wake up the girl who was sleeping. Isla mumbled and rolled around in her little bed. The girl was always grumpy in the morning, and she was even more grumpy if she was really hungry. The child smiled knowingly because they were used to Isla's behavior. Clarice made chocolate chip waffles for you, me. I know they're your favorite, so I ran all the way here to let you have the first bite. I even helped pour the batter. Isla cooed at the happy child and pulled him close to her chest in a loving way. She was wide awake at the thought of food and showered the sweet boy with compliments between kisses. Thanks a lot, Toby. I'm sure the waffles will taste even better today because you helped make them. Toby turned red when he saw how much attention he was getting. He broke free from Isla's hug and ran down the stairs, giggling all the way. Isla shook her head at the cute display and lay in bed for another 10 minutes before getting up and going downstairs in her pajamas. She wore knee-high socks that were grey and an extra long-sleeved shirt that was a pale baby pink. She said hello to the kids who were sitting around the big table in the dining room. Good morning, everyone, she said softly as she walked to her seat at the table. As the little girl walked over to the group, voices echoed what she had said. Toby was bouncing in the seat next to Isla's, excited for her to try his favorite thing. Sadly for him, everyone in the house had already eaten their share of waffles for breakfast, so Isla wasn't the first to try his food like he had hoped. But he quickly forgot about it when she showed up next to him. "Here, try some," Toby said with excitement. "Okay, Toby, I'll get my share." "Don't worry," Isla said with a light laugh as she tried to calm the child who was waiting. Even though her mannerisms were very different, she was used to the bubbly people around her. Isla didn't mind that others quickly grabbed the best-looking waffle and ate it right away. She took the leftovers instead, knowing that they all tasted the same. Isla praised the child who was waiting for her after she tasted the waffles. She smiled as she saw the boy get shy from all the attention. She saw faces that were much younger than hers as she ate, the oldest being about 13 or 14. Her shoulders drooped a little. She was used to seeing this, but she was still sad because she hadn't met anyone her own age yet. Not him. She couldn't help but blush when she thought about the strange man who had walked her home almost a week ago. The way he teased her, how brave he was, and the look of intensity in his eyes when he looked down at her. She couldn't stop thinking about him. She got to know his blue eyes, which were as beautiful as a crystal but as hard as a rock. She wanted to run her fingers through his deep brown hair, which looked soft to the touch. She had seen him do this with her. Lastly, she was very interested in his tattoos. She had never seen anything like that before, maybe on TV in her living room, but not in person. No way. She wanted to run her delicate fingers over his marked skin and study the patterns closely as she did so. She bit her lip and lost herself in thought, lost herself in him. "Isla," Clarice said. The girl, who was dazed, hummed in agreement and looked her carer in the eye. "I need you to go back to town today and get some clothes for Toby. The couple who is supposed to adopt him gave me money to buy some things he will need because they are busy making other plans for his arrival." Isla nodded eagerly and chewed on a piece of the chocolate waffle she had just bitten into. She was surprised by this because she usually had someone with her on all of her trips to the small town up until that week. She thought that her successful business was enough to show that she was independent. "I also think it's time for you to start looking for a job," she said carefully. Isla stopped eating. "What?" she said in a whisper. "Sweetheart," Clarice said. "I've been keeping you here for way too long, and that's my fault. You're the kindest, most pure person I've ever met, and I think of you as my own daughter. But I can't keep you here forever. You need to start making friends with people your own age." The woman put down her knife and fork as if she were getting ready to say something. "After you left that night, I realized how much I've been smothering you. You're 18 and that was the first time you left the house by yourself." She took a deep breath before finishing, "I've had the week to think about it, and I've decided that you need to start living your life, and to do that, you need a job. You've excelled in all of your homeschooling courses and because of that you were able to graduate early. I've already spoken with Mrs. Langford, who owns the town's small bakery. You are a great cook and an even better baker. It shouldn't be too hard because you already know her, and you won't have to deal with too many people at once because you'll be baking in the back for most of the day." Clarice's eyes softened as she looked at Isla's frazzled body. "I'm sorry to throw this at you out of the blue, but you have to believe me that this is for your own good. I'm sorry for taking away this simple freedom for so long. You should have been making these trips years ago. Isla could only look at Clarice after she was done with her speech. The younger kids at the table kept talking, though, because they didn't understand or care about the news that was announced. Isla was torn about being an employee. She mouthed the word and it felt strange on her tongue. She was nervous about talking to people outside of her usual group at the orphanage, but the thought of making new friends and maybe even running into the handsome stranger named Kade at the store made her heart race. After a few moments of thought, Isla smiled nervously at Clarice and spoke. Okay. I'll do it. The next morning, Isla was the last person to finish her breakfast. She was still thinking about her new job at the bakery in town. She played with the milk in her bowl, and as she did, she started to feel anxious about having to talk to people. Getting together with people. For many people, it was a normal thing to do, but for Isla, it was new. She knew she wasn't very good at making friends because she didn't have many sleepovers or late-night phone calls. She didn't think of herself as socially inept, but she had to admit that she had a case of social anxiety. After Isla finished watching the milk drip from her spoon, she got up and went to the kitchen to get 2 more empty plates. Every morning, Isla had to clean up after the kids when they were done eating breakfast. This made sense because she was the oldest child in the house and the only one who could be trusted not to break the fragile china. She made several trips to the dining room to collect the dirty dishes, and it took her almost an hour to finish washing them. When she thought about her new job as a baker, her heart sank again. Isla chewed her lip in worry, and her fingers shook as tears filled her eyes, ready to spill over. She whispered a mantra to herself over and over again. Isla, stop it. You're a big girl. You can do this. It seemed like her words of encouragement worked because the tears that had been in her eyes dried up and the lump in her throat went away. She took a few deep breaths and then walked to Clarice's office at the end of the hall, which was across from her room. She knocked twice before hearing the invitation to come in. How are you, Isla? Why? Clarice asked. She could tell right away that Isla was uncomfortable. It helped that the girl was very honest about how she felt. Isla said, I'm fine. Her words sounded strange on her tongue as if it knew they weren't true. Clarice looked at Isla with eyes full of guilt. She started to doubt her choice to throw Isla to the sharks, which was supposed to be like ripping off a band-aid. But then she pushed those thoughts to the back of her mind and remembered that this was for Isla's own good, even though the way it was done was upsetting. She decided to ease some of her own stress by taking away a task she had given Isla earlier. Don't worry about getting clothes for Toby anymore. I can take care of that. Isla nodded, feeling like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, but there was still one more. Isla said, clearing her throat. I just wanted to know when I would be starting, when my first day would be. Clarice answered carefully, keeping her eyes on the nervous girl to see how she would react. I told her you could start today at 3. Isla's eyes got bigger, and her bottom lip found its way back to her teeth as anxiety took hold of her nerves. She whispered her answer, which was almost lost in her breath. Okay. Isla looked down as she spoke, and tears came to her eyes. She turned and walked out of the room, this time not being able to hold back the salty liquid that fell to the floor behind her. Kade rolled around in bed, still wrapped up in the sheets, despite it approaching 1 o'clock. He couldn't find it in himself to get up, knowing that his usual routine of negotiating payments and contracts with dealers awaited him. Eventually he got out of bed, standing to his full height of 6'3" as he stretched his muscled body. Kade made his way to his closet and threw on a white long sleeve with ripped black jeans, completing his look with Timberlands. He brushed his fingers through his hair messily and pushed the sleeves up to his elbows, not bothering to glance in the mirror before exiting his bedroom. Kade decided to change his routine today just because he could. He wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, so he ignored everyone who said good morning and other things like that as he walked out the door. Kade opened the door to his car violently and slipped inside. The black Range Rover made him feel better because it kept him away from his annoying employees. He took his phone out of his pocket and typed a quick good morning text to the blonde. Work had kept him busy for the past week, but he still thought about the blonde nymphette all the time. He couldn't stop thinking about her sweet face, and it made his eyes soften at times. He hated that he couldn't reach out to her. "Good morning, beautiful girl." Kade smiled and threw his phone into the passenger seat after sending the text. He knew that Isla would blush a lot when she read it. He also knew that she would have trouble accepting a compliment because she was so humble and kind. He thought back to the first time they met that day. His blackened heart seemed to beat when he thought about her and when he was around her, which made him curious. He liked teasing her until her face and neck were hot. He liked how innocent and excited she was. For once, he was the one doing the pursuing, and it felt good. He had never been so in love with someone. No, infatuated was a better word. He had only had a taste of the sweet girl, just a nibble, but the brute wanted more. Isla looked at her phone with interest. She had just finished getting ready for her new job at the bakery and was reading a book when it rang. It was strange, to say the least. Isla never got text messages unless she was out of town with a volunteer and Clarice wanted to know when they would be back. She smiled with excitement when she saw that the message was from Kade. "Good morning, beautiful girl." She let out a small squeal as she read the text, and then she threw her phone on the bed in shock. "Is this real?" she mumbled into her hand. The poor girl had begun to think he had forgotten about her. Isla pressed her hands against her cheeks to try to cool off the heat. She reached for her phone again and bit her lip as she tried to think of a good text. "What should I say? Good morning. Not that boring. Nice to hear from you. That makes me sound like I don't have any friends, which I don't, but he doesn't need to know that." Isla groaned in frustration as she typed and deleted words and emojis. She couldn't bring herself to write a response because she was too insecure. But in the end, she just did it. She quickly wrote a message and hit send without thinking about it too much. A little late for a morning text, K. Isla looked at her screen for a second, and then her heart sank to the bottom of her chest. What was I thinking? Kade is probably making fun of me right now. Why do I have to be such a loser? She quickly typed up another text to try to make up for the one she had sent before. "I got a job at Layers, the town's small bakery. I start at 3, but you can come by and see me if you want." Isla threw her phone on the carpeted floor like it was on fire after she hit send. She buried her face in her pillow and waited for the dreaded ding that meant he had replied. When her phone rang a few minutes later, Isla slowly lifted her face from her pillow and looked over her bed. She was afraid to see the message. Finally, she picked up her phone and forced herself to read it. "Congratulations, baby. I'll try to stop by after work." Isla screamed as she read and reread the blue words. "He's coming to see me." She picked up the book she had forgotten about in the middle of her excitement. She smiled as she flipped through the pages. She could read a little more since she wouldn't be leaving for another hour. Her favorite book, Marcellus, quickly drew her in and kept her entertained. Time flew by as it always did when she was reading, and she was sad to have to leave her secret world of fantasy. Isla closed the book and looked in the mirror. She gave herself another pep talk while she looked at her outfit for her first day of work. She was wearing a white long-sleeve shirt and a burgundy overall dress over it. Her pale legs were covered by black suede thigh-high boots, which kept her soft skin safe from the harsh fall winds. Isla looked up at her head, where her messy bun was still there. Blonde strands of hair framed her face, and she took a breath before going downstairs. It was just after 2 o'clock, and the bakery was about 10 minutes away from the grocery store, which meant a long 30-minute walk. Isla didn't mind, though. She liked having some time to herself and the beautiful fall scenery. She grabbed a light coat from the rack and yelled a quick goodbye to Clarice before heading off to a new chapter in her life. Isla got to the bakery with 15 minutes to spare. She was a little late because she couldn't focus for very long, but she made it. She looked inside the shop and was amazed by the number of people talking at small tables. Most of them had a coffee cup in one hand and a baked good of some kind in the other. Isla's mouth dropped open in awe, and she wished she could talk like that, as if it were second nature. One of the cashiers saw the girl with blue eyes looking into the store. She stopped talking to her coworker and said, "I'll be right back," then walked towards the door. "How can I help you?" Isla jumped at the voice because she didn't think she would be caught, even though she was standing so close to the edge in the small store. She looked up at the stranger with wide eyes. "Excuse me?" The woman asked her question again, and Isla stammered out an answer. "I'm the new baker here. Clarice, my carer, told me that Mrs. Langford was waiting for me at 3. The stranger raised their eyebrows in surprise. They weren't expecting the delicate girl who looked like she had just graduated from high school to be their new full-time baker. Still, the woman in her 20s welcomed the shaking girl inside and led her to the back room. "Hello, I'm Bryn. It's nice to meet you, but Mrs. Langford is out today." Bryn held out her hand to shake Isla's, and the little girl shook it back with a shaky smile. "During the week, I'm usually on cash, but on the weekends, I help out in the back. I can see that you're nervous, but don't be. The old baker we had was a jerk who would yell at customers a lot when they complained about his pastries. You don't seem like the type to yell, so I'm sure you'll be fine." Isla's eyes widened at the bad words that seemed to flow out of this woman's mouth like water. She knew what they meant, but they were words she had been told not to use, and she was a good girl. She realized that the old baker wasn't very good and ignored the rude comments. Then she went up to introduce herself. "Well, I'm Isla." Bryn was confused as to why Mrs. Langford would make the 5'2" girl the head baker of her business. It looked like the girl could barely put together a few words to say her name. She smiled at Isla and quickly listed the recipes for the few pastries and cakes they made at the bakery before taking her to the prep room. So, this is where you should bake everything. I don't really know my way around here. When Toby was here, I usually cracked the eggs or took the finished product out of the oven. It's not too complicated. 4 ovens, a prep table, 2 fridges, and 2 freezers. If you need help with anything, just come to the front and I'll be there. We don't have many chocolate chip cookies or lemon bars right now, so you can start with constituting that. I'll come back every so often to tell you what we need to restock, but other than platitudes desperately need to go. Bryn patted Isla on the back and walked to the front of the bakery, where the bell was ringing. She took her place at the cash register. Isla looked around after Bryn left. The kitchen was 5 times bigger than the one at the orphanage, and the countertops and extra-large fridges made her feel small. She was still thinking about what Bryn had told her as she got the ingredients for chocolate chip cookies and lemon bars. After a while, Isla realized that having a job wasn't so bad if she didn't have to deal with people. She was fine working in the kitchen alone, making a baker's dozen of the low spot of the store. Sometimes, she had to face people when she brought out the food, but that was only for a second before she left the room. Isla was so busy mixing, cracking, and pouring that she almost missed the sound of her name being called. Isla, someone is here to see you. When Bryn said that, Isla looked up at her and pouted. Someone's come to see me. Isla put extra emphasis on the last word of her sentence. She couldn't think of anyone who would be there to see her, other than Clarice, of course, but she knew the middle-aged woman was too busy running an orphanage to come to Layers. Yes. He looks pretty big and scary, but he's also hot. Do tattoos, big muscles, or blue eyes sound familiar? Isla's eyes lit up right away when she heard about her only friend. She had forgotten that she had invited him to the bakery just a few hours before, but she was more surprised that he actually came. He's here. Well, I don't want to keep him waiting. Would he be allowed back here for a bit? I swear he won't touch anything. Bryn's eyebrows shot up in shock when she found out that this small, sweet girl was with a man who was as scary and hot as the one at the front of the bakery. The cashier felt jealous, but she tried to hide it and stammer out a response. Oh, sure. In any case, your shift is over for today. We don't need to make anything right now because the crowd gets quiet around 7. Bryn then left the back room and told Kade he could go in. Isla began to tidy up the prep room, but then she became aware of how messy it was. She began to regret asking Kade to come back there because she was rushing to make her space look nice. Oh no, no, no! She cried as an egg fell out of its box and hit the floor. The girl got down on her hands and knees and began to clean up the sticky mess with a paper towel. Kade laughed and said, "You seem to like being on your knees." Isla stopped wiping and looked up to see the tall, tattooed man leaning against the door frame. He crossed his arms and looked down at the ditzy girl. He was wearing grey sweats and a grey hoodie that matched. "No, I just... I made a mess," the blonde said in a dumb stutter. She felt her throat start to burn with shame. She didn't want her only friend, who was also very good-looking, to see her like that. He must not think very highly of her. Isla's eyes started to water as she put herself down more. She sat down on her knees and tried to wipe some of the flour off her face to make herself look better. Kade's eyes got softer when he saw tears running down her cheeks. He didn't want her to feel bad. He actually thought she looked cute right now, with her messy bun and cheeks covered in flour. It was a beautiful mess. He frowned and turned his lips down, knowing that she didn't see herself the same. "Come here," he said softly. Isla sniffled, looked at him shyly, and then pushed herself off the floor and wiped her hands on her apron. She slowly walked over to him, still feeling self-conscious about how she looked. Kade's frown got worse when she hesitated, so he reached out with his long arms and pulled her into his chest. "Kade!" Isla screamed in shock. Her apron-covered middle was now pressed tightly against his chest. Kade asked in a husky voice, "Why are you crying, pretty girl?" His voice sounded like a low rumble in his chest. "Why you going to get all dirty? Let go of me, Kade." The brutish man grabbed her chin and lifted it so that her eyes were locked on his. Their blue eyes looked like they were looking at each other, but his gaze was much more penetrating, intrusive. Isla didn't want to breathe because she was so aware of how close they were. "I don't care about that," Kade said in a calm voice, but there was something sharp about it that made the blonde bristle in his arms. "I asked you something, and I want you to answer." Isla's heart beat hard against her chest, like an angry man with a hammer. She wasn't used to being confronted like that or losing control. But she had to admit that it felt good to have to answer to someone. It showed that he cared. Isla wanted to cry even more because he was being so nice to her. She hasn't had to deal with a lot of things in her life, so she's overly sensitive and insecure. She can't help that she doesn't know things or that she doesn't see what other people might see as obvious. But he still cared. Isla laughed through her tears and said, "This is so embarrassing." She wiped the salty liquid off her cheeks. "It's really stupid." Kade shook his head and ran his fingers down her back to make her feel better. "I don't think so. Tell me." I didn't want you to see me like this. I'm a mess." She laughed again, trying to lighten the mood so she wouldn't cry again. After a moment, Kade asked, "Do you want me to be honest?" Isla nodded and bit her lip. She made fists with her hands at her sides, letting her nails dig into her palms and leave crescent moon marks. "A little flour isn't going to change my mind about how beautiful you are, inside and out." Her pink lips parted when he said that, and her cheeks got hot. "What?" she asked in disbelief. Kade went on, "I've never met anyone like you, Isla. You're so self-absorbed that you don't even know you're the most beautiful girl in the room." Isla's eyes got bigger when his big hand suddenly stroked her cheek. The warmth of his palm made her already hot pink skin even hotter. I don't know what to say," she said. As he looked at her, some strange feeling rippled through the tides of his oceans. Her blue eyes stared into the depths of his oceans. "Then don't say anything," he said, thinking as he wiped away some of the flour that had gotten stuck under her eye with his thumb. "Or, tell me you'll let me take you out sometime." Isla's heart stopped beating in her chest, and her eyes were wide as she thought about what had just been said. "Take me out? Like a date?" Kade wanted to laugh at how she didn't believe him, but he stopped himself and smiled instead. "Just like a date," he thought. His eyes were on her lips, but somehow he was able to resist the urge and turn his attention back to the girl who was blushing. Isla whispered, I think I would like that, as she tried not to lean into the hand that was rubbing calming circles on her side. Do you think? Kade teased with a smile that showed off his dimples. His hand moved up her side to her ribs until he got the reaction he wanted, laughter. Isla laughed as he tickled her and tried to wiggle out of his arms to get away from his fingers. No, I want to. I swear, she said. She laughed. Kade bent his head down, and his nose brushed against the crevice of her neck very lightly. Her giggles died down a little. She couldn't stop the butterflies that were flying around in her stomach or the shallow breaths that came from being so close to him. I believe you. He kissed her neck softly and then pulled away all of a sudden. I'll come get you at 6 tomorrow. Kade couldn't stop thinking about her all day. He was unbearable at work, and he could hardly pay attention during team meetings. He was staring at the clock, waiting for it to strike 6 so he could get to her front porch. He raised his wrist to knock on the door of the orphanage, but it opened before he could. Kade, she said, as if she couldn't believe he was really there. A child's scream broke up their moment, and the girl quickly closed the door behind her out of shame. You really came? Of course I did. Didn't I tell you I would? That tone of voice was playful again. Isla smiled a little, enchanted for a moment by Kade's dark but charming smile. His brow rose when she kept looking at him, but it only made her notice a few stray hairs that were resting lightly on his forehead. Are you ready to go? Hey! She hummed and blinked, looking confused. He chuckled softly as he asked the same question again. I asked if you were ready. Isla said, oh. Yes, let's go. Kade shook his head in amusement and put his hand on the small of her back as he led them back to his car. He hurried to open the door for the passenger and smiled at the shy girl, who said thanks in a low voice. He slammed the door shut and walked to the driver's side of the car. Then he jumped in and slammed the door shut. Kade got into the black Range Rover, buckled up, and started the car. When Isla reached over to mess with the radio dial, he raised an eyebrow in surprise. When the shy girl saw him staring, she stopped what she was doing and shrank back into her seat. I'm sorry, please, go ahead. Don't mind me, Kade said as he pulled away from the curb. He didn't want to make the poor girl nervous by watching her every move, but it was hard not to. He was interested in her more than anyone else, and he was fascinated by the most boring things just because she did them. I don't get to listen to music much, she said after a minute. Kade looked at her for a second, but her head was turned towards the passenger window. I've never really had the time. She spoke again, this time looking back at the tattooed man next to her. Kade looked into her eyes for a second before turning his attention back to the road and tightening his grip on the wheel. Baby, you can listen to all the music you want when you're with me. Isla smiled to herself and kept staring at this mysterious man. His tough and cold exterior was very misleading, to be honest. She focused on the rings that adorned his long fingers and the tattoos that crawled up his sleeves. There was no doubt that he was an intimidating man. But he didn't make her feel less than. Instead, he made her feel good and fuzzy and gave her all kinds of warm feelings. Kade was a very mysterious man. Isla gasped in awe when she saw Kade's house. It was 10 times bigger than her old orphanage and the plants around it were amazing. Isla said softly, mostly to herself, "Your house is very beautiful." Thanks. Kade parked the car at an angle in his big circular driveway and then jogged to the other side to open the door for Isla. He held out his hand for her to take. Isla put her hand in his, and his big hand made hers look small. She stood up straight and barely reached the top of his chest. She bent her head up to look him in the eye. "Hi," she said softly. Kade smiled slightly as he spoke. "Hello, little one." He gently pulled her along and went into his house, smiling as Isla gasped. Isla stopped in the kitchen doorway, as if she were trying to take in the dim lighting, dark finishes, and the well-decorated table in the middle that was full of professionally made food. "You can cook." The girl looked up at him, but he was already looking down at her, so their eyes met for a brief but very intimate moment. "It's a pleasure that makes me feel bad." Even though it was clear he was talking about how good he was at cooking, the low husk of his voice and the way he raked his eyes over her smaller body made Isla feel tingly and hot. She nervously licked her lips and then looked down to get away from his gaze. Her thick thighs rubbed against each other to try to ease the strange feeling. It was something she did without thinking about it, but Kade, he was watching. "Come sit over here," he said, taking her hand and leading her to the table. He then pulled out a chair for her. "Oh, thank you," Isla said shyly before lowering herself down. She was glad that her hair was covering the right side of her face so that it didn't show how flustered she was. "Isla." The girl hummed without thinking about it, and her mind was full of teasing words and thoughts that were not at all appropriate for the situation. "I want to see your face, pretty girl. You look great." Isla did what she was told and pushed the rebellious strands behind her ear with her delicate fingers, which had soft pink nails. "This looks great, Kade, but you really didn't have to go through all this trouble, hey?" the taller man said, his blue eyes locking with her sparkling aquamarines again. "I wanted to." "What do you want now?" "Here, I'll make you a plate." Isla sat still in her seat, her Anna barely touching the floor as she watched Kade fill her plate with food. She bit her lip as he piled it high, fighting the urge to tell him that he was giving her too much since he had already told her to be quiet when she said the same thing before. "So, how long have you been making things?" Isla licked her lips and looked down at the plate that had just been put in front of her. Since I could walk." She giggled lightly. "Or at least that's what Clarice says." She stabbed a piece of broccoli with her fork before she felt the need to look up. When she did, she saw that Kade was looking at her with his palm under his chin. "Clarice?" "Yeah, she's my caretaker at the orphanage, yeah. She took care of me and a few other kids." Isla took a bite of honey-glazed chicken and broccoli and hummed with pleasure, her legs swinging in delight. "What about you? This food tastes great. You must have been cooking for a while." Kade watched her eat with a smile on his face. She looked so small and delicate in the big sweater and chair she was sitting in. She wasn't even sitting that high up, and her feet could barely touch the floor. Everything about her screamed innocence, but even her body was starting to betray that pure image. When she squeezed those thick, creamy thighs of hers, she probably had no idea what she was doing, but he knew that she was just begging to be touched. He wanted to help her through these new feelings, either with his fingers or his mouth. As a gentleman, he'd let her choose. Kade. I'm sorry, baby, but you're right. I don't cook very often, though, because I don't have the time. The conversation turned into light talk, and Kade was glad to see that Isla was a little more at ease. When she told her stories, she laughed loudly and made animated faces. He could tell that she was usually a quieter person, so he felt special knowing that she was showing him a side of herself that most people didn't get to see. Isla tried to stab another piece of food with her fork, but when she heard a clink, she frowned. How did I finish all of that? Is that it? Kade asked, his voice light and playful. The girl nodded and put down her fork. Let me help you clean up, Isla said as she stood up and walked over to get his empty plate. Kade, however, gently grabbed her wrist before she could do so. So polite, he said softly as he stroked the back of her hand. But don't worry about it, I'll have one of the maids do it. Isla nodded, trying not to think too much about how Kade had maids. What do you think about watching a movie? Would you like that? She smiled at his offer and moved closer. Yes, please. Kade's jaw ticked as he fought the urge to pull her onto his lap. It would be so easy to have her straddling him and wrapped up in his arms. But he didn't want to scare the poor girl away, so he got his act together. Okay, let's go. They walked down a floor to his private home theater, which was where they had come in. He set up his Netflix account on the big flat screen and then gave the remote to the blonde girl on the couch. You can choose any movie you want. I'll be back with some food. Isla's head shot up when he said food, and she looked at him expectantly. She didn't need to say anything for him to get her message. Kade chuckled and said, I didn't forget about your fruity pearls, baby. He let her choose a movie and then went upstairs to change into sweats and get the girl some snacks. Isla flipped through the choices with interest because she wasn't used to the streaming service. The only movies she watched were on DVD at her orphanage, which was the only luxury they could afford. She quickly found something she knew and loved, Frozen. The movie was in the most popular category on Netflix, which made sense since she had seen it so many times before. It was her favorite movie out of the 10 they had at home, and she was excited to see Kade again. The tattooed man came down the stairs, but he stopped for a moment to watch the girl bounce up and down with excitement. He thought it was cute how quiet she was, but it was nice to see her full of energy. She deserved to feel that way. He made himself known after watching her from the door and put the popcorn on the small coffee table in front of them. He sat down next to Isla and leaned over to get the popcorn and the fruity pearls that were still on top. Thank you, she said with a smile. Then she took the red bag from him and looked for her usual mix of red and yellow. When she found the pair, she put them in her mouth and sucked on them hard. Kade started the movie and got comfortable, but when he looked over at the girl next to him, he saw that her cheeks were hollowed out, and her tongue was poking against them every so often. He groaned quietly, cursing himself for being so horny at such an innocent act. He hadn't had sex in a while, so you can't really blame him for all his pent-up energy. Kade had to look away from the blonde girl because he could feel his length twitching under his sweats. To take his mind off of how turned on he was, he decided to keep watching the movie, even though he was confused about why the snowman was singing, walking, and talking, and why there was a musical number every 10 minutes. Finally, he couldn't resist any longer and looked down at the angel again. He almost came right then and there because of what she was doing. The little girl was now sucking on her fingers to get the butter and salt off of the popcorn. Kade had had enough of her games. He knew they were innocent, but didn't. How about we get you a serviette, baby? He cleared his throat and stood up from the couch, ready to leave the room and get his situation situated. Sorry, oh, look, there's one right here. Isla reached over to get the only paper serviette and cleaned her fingers while looking up at him with a worried look on her face. Are you okay? For once, the big man looked surprised and moved back over to sit next to her on the couch. Yes. Yes, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Isla hummed, not sure if Kade was telling the truth. She stopped the movie and turned to face him, giving him her full attention. You're so nice, Kade. No one has ever been so nice to me. Please let me know if something is bothering you. This is the least I can do to show my gratitude for your kindness. Kade didn't say anything. He felt her knee brush against his length, which was clearly printed on his black sweats, and his jaw clenched. He could see that she was starting to overthink things again as his eyes searched hers. Her mind was selfless and caring of others, but it wasn't so kind to itself. It's not you, he said before she could even ask. Well, it is, but it's Kade sighed, not knowing how else to say it. He took her hand and put it on his crotch. He watched as the girl's lips parted and her cheeks turned rosy pink. It's you. Isla shut her mouth and opened it again, but no words came out. Finally, she was able to stutter out an answer. I'm sorry. Kade groaned and shook his head at her when she said she was sorry. Don't be sorry, baby. Trust me. There was a pregnant pause in the room when Isla pulled her hand away, but her eyes quickly went back to his black sweats, and she looked unsure. Is there anything I can do to help? Both of them were shocked by Isla's words. The blonde looked the most upset, with pink skin and bright eyes, and it was clear that adrenaline was pumping through her body. That's not, Isla, I'm not asking you to, but I want to. I like you, Kade, and I want to help. You need to show me how. Kade's eyes widened when Isla told him she had feelings for him. He had no idea she would say that. But he couldn't deny that the idea of teaching sounded great. They were both consenting adults who cared about each other. This time, when it really mattered, he would give in to his darkest desires. Okay, he said. Isla was glad he couldn't hear her heart racing in her chest. Pretty girl, this is where lesson 1 begins. Kade put his finger on her pink pout and let it stay there for a moment on the soft cushion of her lips before taking it away. Isla licked her lips and then looked down at his clothed crotch, which looked like it was tented by his hard-on. But when two strong fingers held her chin, she couldn't look away from the tattooed man. Here, he said again, and the girl finally got it. Isla bit her bottom lip and moved closer to his big body, hoping she didn't look too eager. But the way her lip twitched up made it clear that she was more than happy to kiss him. When her lips brushed against his in a soft kiss, Kade smiled. Her pout was soft, and she tasted like candy. He couldn't help but run his fingers through her blonde hair and pull her head closer to his so he could have more than just a taste of her. Isla moaned in pleasure as he roughly handled her. She loved how he moved her around and pressed into the kiss to take charge. Kade pulled away just before she ran out of breath, but that didn't stop her from panting. The dominant man held the back of her head and kissed her neck and jaw again, which made Isla moan from the new feeling. "You drive me crazy," he said in a raspy voice against her skin. I'm going to put you over my lap and give you something to really be sorry about if you say you're sorry one more time." Isla's breath caught at his words, and her mind raced with what that situation would look like. But his tone was enough to make her stop talking. "I won't, Kade," she whispered. A small part of her wanted to test him and call him out on his bluff, but who was she kidding? Kade didn't seem like the type of guy who would break his word. Good, he thought. Is it time for lesson 2 yet? Kade's jaw twitched at what she said, and he grabbed the girl's hips to pull her over and sit on his lap. "I think 1 is enough for today," he said with a sigh. If this were any other girl, he would have gone ahead without thinking twice. But Isla wasn't just a club whore, she was so much more. He didn't want to mess things up by moving too fast too soon. But, the urge was there. The girl was so eager and ready for him, and she trusted him so much. Kade wasn't a saint, he was far from one. But if he gave in to the urge to corrupt and destroy this girl on his lap, he would be damned. No man, no matter how bad, should even think about it. "But I want to," Isla insisted. Her small hands were on his broad shoulders as she spoke in a softer voice, her nose turning red. "Really, Kade, I liked kissing you." Kade bit back a groan at what she said. The blonde beauty was making things very hard for him. "Baby, I liked kissing you too." He smiled as Isla's face turned redder and she giggled nervously. "I wasn't that bad, was I?" "You're a natural," Kade said. He let his finger run over her lips, which were a little swollen, and his eyes got darker when her tongue flicked out to lick his finger. "You're not as shy as you say you are," he thought, but he was happy to see her acting so wild. Isla smiled shyly but shook her head at him. "You just make me feel different." Kade slammed the car door shut as he walked around the car to help Isla get out and take her to the orphanage. "Let me take you to work tomorrow. I know you walk the whole way." "You don't have to. I really like to walk." Kade took her hand and squeezed it gently, which made her stop talking. "Please, it would make me happy." Isla's eyes were wide as she tried not to look down at their hands. His palm was big enough to cover her small one. His skin was rough and calloused, which showed that he was a hard-working man. "Well, if it would make you happy," she gave in. Kade smiled at her and led her across the street and up the steps to her front door. Isla couldn't stop thinking about how warm his hand felt against hers. "I had a lot of fun with you, Kade. You are so nice." She bit her lip and looked at the door before looking back at him, who was staring at her with a cold look. "Can I give you a kiss?" Kade tried not to look too happy when she asked him, but he nodded and smiled with dimples. He loved that she had to stand on her tippy toes to reach him, and even then, he had to bend his head down a little to make room for her. Their lips met slowly, and once again he met her soft touch with brute force. He pressed his chest against hers and enjoyed the little mewls that came from the back of her throat. He boldly pushed his tongue into her mouth. He knew that she would be shocked by both his sudden intrusion and the cool feeling of his tongue piercing. His guesses were right. Kade smiled into the kiss when the smaller girl gasped, but when her quick fingers pulled at his brown hair, he let out a satisfied groan. She was a minx, that's for sure. Baby, you can kiss me whenever you want. Once she let go, he rasped. Isla touched her lips lightly and looked up at the man with tattoos in awe. That was hot, Kade said, still looking down at her with anger in his eyes. Isla was still shocked. You didn't tell me you had a piercing. She tried to sneak another look at his mouth while he laughed. You never asked. But how would I? The blonde narrowed her eyes at him playfully, seeing the cheesy grin on his face. Touché. She gave in, and the taller man laughed even harder. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Isla said with a smile. Her chest felt warm and full of happiness. And I'll see you. Kade saw her open the door and waved. She waved back. After she was safely inside, he turned around and jogged down the porch steps to get back to his car. He sighed when he sat down on the leather of his Range Rover, but when his phone rang, he groaned. Kendall, Kade said without thinking. Kade, I just got off the phone with Voss, and he couldn't stop talking about how great our delivery team was on the second. He said they were quick and helpful. Raphael Voss was one of Kade's biggest and longest-lasting clients. He owns a lot of nightclubs across the country and likes to throw big parties with a lot of drugs, women, and alcohol. In every other part of his life, he was pretty laid back, but he had no patience at all. Kade wasn't lying when he told the new guys to show up with the order at 8 p.m. If they had been 1 minute late, Voss would have told his hitman to kill them and then complain to Kade about how late they were. The old fool paid well, but his temper was a problem, especially when he killed off his workers who were doing a good job. Voss didn't trust any other drug ring to get his product from, so even though there have been many mishaps, he refused to leave the top drug lord in the country. See, Micah, I told you the kid would be okay. No need to worry. Micah laughed like he was making fun of his boss. Yeah, and I'm sure I'll grow a second pair of balls by tomorrow, too, right? Yes, the kids did well today. Hats off to them. But they probably ran home to Rhodes right away to kiss him. Kade laughed at the picture. We still need to do a background check and make sure they're not lying to us. Kade thought his friend was being paranoid, but he decided to end his suffering. Micah, do you really not remember how long I've been doing this? I called Douglas to check out the Graveborn's past after you left my room last night. I can handle it. You can relax now. Hey dude, it would have been nice if you had told me that, Micah said with a sigh of annoyance. Thanks for thinking about it. You're welcome. When Kade heard Micah chuff in annoyance, he almost laughed. Whatever. As a thank you, Voss asked us to come to his party at Lux's. Meet me there at 9. After Micah talked, he hung up. The friends never really cared about formalities, so not saying goodbye wasn't rude, it was normal. Kade threw his phone in the passenger seat and closed his eyes. He rested his head on the headrest behind him. He didn't really want to go to this party, which was new for him. Almost every night, he would go to the club, drink until he was numb, and then take any willing woman to bed. He usually had a good time because he was hot, rich, and famous. He didn't realize how empty his life was until he met Isla. He was always around a lot of people, but he still felt alone. Now, the thought of women in revealing clothing who weren't the shy blonde made him uncomfortable. She had him under her spell and didn't even know it. A loud knock on his window made him jump, and his hand instinctively went for the black Glock 19 that was in his glove compartment. But then he saw blonde hair moving out of the corner of his eye and did a double take when he saw Isla standing right outside his door. Kade's heart stopped when he realized he had almost shot her. He shut the door and pushed the button to roll down the window. "Miss me yet?" Isla smiled at his question and put her hands on the frame, which no longer had windows, so she could look inside the car. "I was going to bed, but I saw that your car was still here. I just wanted to check that everything was okay." Kade teased, "Ah, so you're stalking me then," with a playful look in his eyes. Isla laughed at what he said. "Actually, my room has a direct view of the street." "It was just a coincidence," she said with a smile. Kade smiled and looked at her for a moment. "Do you want to do something fun?" he asked in a low voice. He wasn't sure if this was the best thing to do, but he felt like he knew the girl a little better now. She wanted to try new things because she hadn't done much before. She wanted to break free, to live, and he wanted to be the one to let her. "Something like..." Isla's voice was slow, but her eyes were bright with interest. "Like a party," Kade said. He could see her lean even more into the car when he said that. "I've never been to a party," she said, taking a breath. "When do we go?" Kade's eyebrows went up when she answered, but he shouldn't have been surprised by how open she was to new things. He looked at the dashboard and saw that it was 10 minutes after 9 and he was supposed to meet Micah a while ago. He smirked at Isla. "How about now?" Right now?" "Okay, just give me a minute to change." "Can you wait for me?" "Of course," Kade said. He saw her hurry back to the orphanage and smiled when he saw her pajamas. She was wearing pink bunny slippers on her feet, and her night shorts were just peeking out from under her big sweater. "Cute," he said to himself as she went back inside the front door. After about 10 minutes, he saw the door to the orphanage open, and the blonde girl he knew well skipped down the steps. She was wearing clothes that showed off her creamy skin and made her curvy body look even better. Her bare legs seemed to go on forever, and he couldn't help but stare. She wore only a short, Aztec-patterned mini-skirt to cover up. When he looked higher, his jaw dropped when he saw the grey long-sleeved crop top that cut low to show off her generous cleavage. Kade whispered, "God must be putting him to the test." "Do I look good?" Isla asked as she slid into the passenger seat. She smoothed her hands over her skirt and fidgeted, showing that she was a little nervous. "Okay? You look really hot." Kade's blunt words almost made her gasp, but she bit her lip before she could. She looked down at her bare thighs and got embarrassed. "Thanks." Isla was startled by a sudden ringtone. Kade smiled apologetically and reached for his phone in the middle console. There was a picture of Micah on the screen. Kade mumbled. He answered by swiping his finger across the screen, and he spoke before his friend could say anything. "I know, I know, I'm late. I had to get someone. He looked over at Isla, who was already looking at him with interest. When she realized she was staring, her eyes got bigger, and she turned her body to look out the window. Come on, Kade, Micah said. I've been waiting here for 30 minutes. I would have beaten you if I wasn't about to get laid. Kade rolled his eyes because he knew that was total stupid. Okay. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He sighed and hung up, then threw his phone into the cup holder without thinking. Who was that? Isla asked. Not a single important person. Kade reached over her seat and pulled her seatbelt across her chest to buckle her in. Are you ready to go? Isla nodded, her face turning red from his polite behavior. Kade smirked and put his arm behind her seat so he could back out of the parking lot and head to the party. Kade pulled up to the valet at Look's nightclub. The loud music and sights were all too familiar. He got out of the car and quickly opened the door for Isla, who looked a lot more nervous than before. Thanks, Danny. Kade nodded his thanks as he threw the keys to the Range Rover to the middle-aged man. Look after her. He raised his eyebrows in a serious way as he pointed to his car, even though the worker knew Kade well and knew he was joking. Always do. Danny laughed and shook hands with the tattooed man before getting into the car. I'm nervous, Isla said as they got closer to the entrance. She pressed against his side as they got closer to the loud, crowded building, and her heartbeat was louder than the music. Hey, look at me. Kade took her aside and raised her chin so that their eyes were locked on each other. Just stick with me while we're in there. You don't need to worry about anything. Isla nodded and bit her bottom lip nervously. She believed what Kade was saying. She trusted him. But her body couldn't help but react to being in a completely new place. Okay, she said, her voice shaking. Okay, Kade said again, this time with a smile. Rod. He took her hand and led her back to the busy crowd. Because he was a VIP member, he was able to skip the long line of people who were waiting to get in. Isla couldn't hear herself think anymore when they came in. The music was so loud that it hurt her ears, and she could feel the bass rumble in her chest. Flashing lights of different colors made the sweat on grinding bodies stand out, as well as the sinful things that happened in dark corners. Isla held Kade's shirt tightly as she looked at the new pictures with excitement. A tattooed arm wrapped around her waist, and his lips whispered in her ear. Welcome to the party, Kade. You bastard. Kade rolled his eyes and straightened up when he heard the familiar voice over the music. He turned around to see Micah's green eyes and quickly looked over the short brunette who was holding onto his arm. Didn't I tell you I was coming? Micah drank from his drink and then turned his head towards Isla. Who's this? When Kade squeezed Isla's side a little, she paid attention to the conversation again. She looked up at him in confusion. Say hello, pretty girl, he said softly in her ear. When Isla realized she was being rude, her mouth made a-oh. Hi, I'm Isla. It's nice to meet you. She stopped talking because she didn't know what to call him. Micah, the boy said in a sweet voice. His arm came free from the brunette, and he didn't listen to her when she told him to stop. He stepped closer to Isla and leaned down so she could hear him better. He pointed to his empty glass. I'll get a refill. Do you want anything, sweetheart? Isla's eyes got big when he made his offer, and she stepped back into Kade's chest to put some space between them. I don't know, stop being a prick, Micah, Kade snapped. The boy with the curly hair was like this with all the girls he brought around, and most of the time he didn't mind. In fact, sometimes they even shared. Isla was different, though. He thought she was his and his alone. Maybe he was selfish for thinking that, but the thought of another man touching her made him sick to his stomach. What's wrong with you? Come on, don't be like that, Micah said with a laugh. Kade growled, I said get off. Micah got a little more serious when he heard his voice, and the boy with the green eyes stepped back and raised his hands to protect himself. Okay. He gave his boss the middle finger as he walked back. Come to the bar and find me when you're ready. Kade gritted his teeth as he watched his friend walk away into the crowd, the short brunette stumbling to catch up with him. Micah was loyal, but he didn't like some of his friend's less pleasant traits. You two are friends? Isla asked in surprise. It looked like Kade could barely stand Micah. Wasn't that what friends were supposed to do? It's not easy. Isla was about to say something when Kade took her hand and led her to the stairs. Wait, where are we going? Being a member has its perks, Kade said with a wink as he led her to the VIP lounge. Kade led Isla up the stairs and told her to stay a few steps ahead of him. But when she turned a corner, Kade couldn't see her for a moment. He also couldn't see the drunk man in his 40s who was coming down at the same time. The man was swaying as he held onto the railing and went down the steps one at a time. But when he saw the short blonde girl who he thought was alone and weak, he stopped moving. Hey, sweetheart, the man said with a mischievous look in his bleary eyes. Why are you up here all by yourself? The man with the bald head and a beer belly that stuck out a little bit reached out to touch Isla's hair, which was falling down her back in messy waves. I'm actually with someone, Isla said shakily as she tried to get away from him. But the man was quicker and pulled her close to his swaying body. Kade turned the corner and was shocked to see this drunkard pushing Isla around. His jaw clenched, but when she screamed, he saw red. Hey! What do you think you're doing? He hit the drunk man's head against the wall, which made him moan and let Isla go. Kade quickly picked Isla up and held her close. His face twisted in worry when he heard her sniffle and shake. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.